everyone, and welcome to the Real Talk podcast from no matter where or when you're tuning in. My name is Rashia, and I'll be today's host. Now, I'm incredibly excited for today's episode because we have a truly special guest joining us, someone whose work has changed countless lives across Canada. Please join me in welcoming Danielle Forbes, the Executive Director of National Service Dogs, or NSD in short. Hello,
Hello,
Danielle. How
hello.
are you?
I'm doing great. I'm going to apologize in advance because now that there's actually a conversation going on, my puppy has decided it's a really good time to play. So I apologize if you hear crazy noises in the background. I will try to corral his behavior.
No worries. No worries.
Here,
We're
bud.
so excited. Just to start us off, if you could just share a little bit about yourself and your role at NSD.
So I am NSD's currently executive director. I'm also one of the co-founders, and we are excited to be just entering into our 30th year. So we
Wow.
have 3 decades worth of life-changing work behind us. And yeah, I've been training dogs for over 30 years. So I started in this as a dog trainer, not as an executive director, fundraiser, and business manager. But and I still have the dogs at home, obviously. So I still get to do a little bit of training and
Mhm.
get some puppy love occasionally. But yeah, I went to university for animal sciences, and this is kind of where I landed.
No, your journey is truly inspiring. Now, so you said that you co-founded National Service Dogs in 1996, I believe.
That's correct.
So 30-year anniversary, right?
Yeah,
Congratulations on that.
thank
So,
you.
and this was at a time when autism service dogs didn't exist, and I think that's one of your fortes as NSC. So, what problem did you see back then that made you realize that this needs to change?
Well, in all honesty, we actually didn't see the problem. The problem came to us.
Mhm.
I was actually working for another service dog provider, as were my fellow co-founders. And somebody approached us looking for an autism service dog. They'd been to a conference in the States and they'd run
Mhm.
into a gentleman who was actually in a wheelchair and had a service dog for his mobility issues, but had mentioned to this mom of a 3-year-old with autism that the dog helped him with his autism more than his mobility. So
Mhm.
she was intrigued and brought that home to Canada and started calling around to see if she could get an autism service dog specifically, and found out very quickly that nowhere in North America had anybody ever heard of such a thing. It didn't exist. When that call came into where my previous employer, we kind of just were going to do it as a side project, right outside of the organization, on our own time. I had a cousin with autism, so I had kind of a very basic visual representation of what autism was. And but other than that, we really didn't know anything or much of anything about the autism community.
Mhm.
And so we reached out to this family and just offered to train a dog for them as a one-off. And they invited us in October of 1996 to go to the Geneva Center for Autism conference in Toronto. It's a big
Mhm.
North America wide conference. And we had the dog that we were training for her son. And we had 30 requests for dogs. So we're like, okay, this is not a one off. We are going to start National Service Dogs. We originally applied when we incorporated to be called Canadian Service Dogs.
Oh, okay.
And the government wouldn't let us use the word Canada in our name, so we had to rename and rebrand as National Service Dogs. And so that's how we got our start. Just one parent looking for an alternative therapy for their child with autism, right? Because back 30 years ago, you know, applied behavioral interventions existed. A lot of behaviors were controlled through medication,
Yeah.
and there wasn't a ton of alternatives to help deal with some of the behavioral outbursts. The sleep hygiene was non-existent. A lot of the kids don't sleep
Mhm.
properly. So there was no real path holistically through the dog stuff. And so we just, like I said, with that first client, we were like, well, we don't know what this is going to look like in the end, but we're going to do it together. And if it works, awesome.
Yeah.
and it did work.
No, it's truly incredible how like a side project like is like where it is now, you know? And it's really amazing and to hear the story is wonderful.
Well, it just
Um,
goes to show, if you have a crazy idea, sometimes it's worth following up on.
yeah.
Mhm.
So NSD placed the world's first certified autism service dog in 1997, creating like a global standard, like you said earlier. So what were some of the early challenges in like launching this program? Because no roadmap really existed. You were the first.
That's right. Yeah. So, I mean, I'd say it without disrespect, but our first clients were kind of guinea pigs. It was trial and error, right? So we got very lucky. Our first dog she was beautiful. She actually we were looking to find a puppy that we could raise right from 8 weeks all the way through. So we went to look at a litter of puppies, and the puppies were fine, but the Chris, the my one of my co-founders who went to look at the dogs, the female mom kept following him everywhere around the house, and he kind of said to the owner of the puppies, like, the puppies are lovely, but would you sell mom, because she's awesome. And they did. They sold us Shade, and we trained her up, and I credit her with a lot of our success, because if that dog wasn't as good as she was, and if she hadn't been that bonded to people and driven to stay with her boy, and it had fallen apart, we wouldn't have moved
Yeah.
forward, right? Like, if
Hmm.
that first team hadn't been a wild success, it would have put a damper on things, because I can tell you the second team we placed crashed and burned.
Oh.
The child was very, very frightened of the dog, very unsure of the dog. Because we didn't have the experience to go by, we thought, well, we'll try all these different things. We'll condition the child and the dog together. The dog
Hmm.
was a golden retriever with a little bit of energy. And what was interesting is that particular placement, the child and the dog worked beautifully in public. When he was tethered to the dog, he'd walk with his hand on the dog's back, and the dog very much grounded him and kept him safe.
Yeah.
Where we had issues was in the house. The dog randomly moving around the house, he could not
Hmm.
cope with, because he could not predict the dog's behavior. The
Yeah.
dog wasn't on leash, and it caused a huge amount of stress. So he was actually more stressed in his house with the dog than he was before the dog. And the way the house was set up, it was an open concept, so it was smaller spaces, not as much room to move. Um, so we ended that placement after 6 months, sat down with the family to reevaluate how we assessed the kids
Yeah.
and what realistically would work, because of course the parents had bonded with the dog. The child had, to a certain extent, like I said, in those exterior working roles,
Hmm.
but that really informed how we move forward with future placements. We learned a lot about making sure that, it's not uncommon for especially young kids not to engage with the dog. And, sometimes they do. Sometimes they come in, you go in to do an interview, and you have a dog with you, and the kids literally embrace the dog, love the
Yeah.
dog. A lot of times they're aloof, or not interested at all. And that's not a deal breaker. Those bonds come over time with trust as it's built up. But for children that were like really, really stressed out and nervous and scared, we were like, we can't force this.
Yeah.
So we took a step back. And I mean, the good news story is the family moved to a larger house in a quieter neighborhood with more open concept. And a year later, we placed what we call a skilled companion dog in there. So there was no
Okay.
requirement for the child to interact with the dog, to be tethered to the dog. And that went on to be a very positive placement. And he was able to build a relationship of trust, that because he had the space to do it, right? And
Yeah.
so, but we learned a lot from that. But those are the early experiences where it was a bit rough on our initial clients, because,
Hmm.
and they knew going in that this was completely new. There was no framework that we were following. And yeah, and I can say one of the other challenges, and I have to give kudos to the school boards we worked with early on. When we placed our first dog, the young fellow was 4, and he went to the Catholic school, and he
Hmm.
went to a half a day with an autism specialty program.
Yeah.
And both schools accepted the dog. We went in and trained the staff, and he brought the dog to school with him. And he was able to actually go from kindergarten to grade 12 with a dog by his side.
Oh,
Not his first
wow.
dog because she retired, but his second dog finished high school with him. And they were fully supported from kindergarten through grade 12. Unfortunately, the school situation is not that accommodating as it was back in the day.
Yeah.
But considering a service dog for a child with autism that needs to be handled by a third party, whether it's a parent or an educational assistant, was completely outside of the norm.
Yeah.
You did not, like in the service dog and guide dog world, if you weren't 18 years of age or older, you weren't getting a dog. You had to be able to independently handle,
Hmm.
qualify, and certify with the dog. So to put a dog with a child that couldn't physically handle the dog themselves, give verbal commands, and do all the handler stuff, um, we relied on EAs and teachers to do all that, and
Yeah.
they stepped up. And again, we had to build that school placement model from scratch based on those initial teams.
Hmm.
So
No,
that
it's so
was,
sweet to hear like how like he graduated with the dog. Yeah, it's really heartwarming.
yeah. Those are just a few of the things that pop up.
Also, in 2011, NSD also became the first accredited program in Canada to provide service dogs for veterans with PTSD, and later on, first responders, I believe, as well. So why do you think it's so important to like incorporate mental health professionals directly into your organization through this?
Well, that's been a journey as well. To backtrack to the last question and segue into this one, the service dog industry, when I started in it 30 plus years ago, the model for the industry was the dog trainers trained the dogs, but they also did all the client interviews, client training, client follow up. So you not only had to be good with dogs, you had to be a people
Yeah.
person. You had to have the ability to teach, because a lot of what we do with our clients, the dogs we can teach, the clients we have to coach and teach, and you have to be a teacher and a dog trainer and all those pieces. And the service dog model back in the day was the trainers were expected to do it all. And I can tell you, as somebody who went through my early years of life thinking that I wanted to work with animals so I could avoid people, I was probably not the best person to be doing client work and dog work. I've since become a people person, but in my younger days, that's not what I aspired to. And so one of the earlier challenges we had too was just dealing with the people parts of it. Um, because although autism, the dogs are trained specifically to do physical tasks to support the kids, whether it's deep pressure, halting to keep the kids safe, interrupting negative or harmful behaviors. Those are
Yeah.
all trained tasks. But at the heart of it, too, there's a mental health piece. And the service dog industry was really slow to come around to mental health and the dog's role in a mental health situation. Um, we had to fight actually in the early days of the autism program. There was those in the service dog community that didn't think that they were service dog material, that they were just emotional support dogs.
Yeah.
There was a lot of mental health stigma attached, even within the service dog community.
Hmm.
Unfortunately, that stigma kind of hung around right into 2011 with the PTSD, because even as the PTSD programs were gaining traction from 2008 into when we started ours in 2011, there was still a lot of debate as to whether or not an emotional support dog was for mental health only, or what a service dog for mental health would look like. Like those
Yeah.
discussions were still ongoing, and nothing was carved in stone. And when we got into PTSD, we very quickly realized that we needed to be mental health experts. And we, as
Hmm.
dog trainers, were getting by on the people side of it, but adding in those mental health pieces was outside of our scope of expertise. And with PTSD especially, we were one of the first programs in the world to develop a policy on suicide intervention, staff and client well-being and safety around
Yeah,
suicide and mental health. Um, and the only reason we were able to lead on that was because we made the commitment to hire mental health professionals early on. And what we quickly realized when we started doing the PTSD dogs in 2011 is that we had been underservicing our autism clients as well, not just because we weren't dealing directly with the children's behavioral issues or emotional issues, but that the parents, a lot of mental health knows no boundaries. It's not limited to PTSD.
yeah,
Families and parents, especially with special needs kids, they struggle with depression, anxiety. They have all those things too, right? And if the
yeah,
parents, if you're not taking into consideration the wellness of the parents, their ability to cope with stress, taking on a dog is a huge responsibility and a huge stressor.
for sure.
We were kind of missing the mark there. And on reflection, once we did bring mental health into the team, I kind of thinking backwards was like, oh, I wish I could go back and apologize to all of our families from 1996 to 2011 because we weren't addressing mental health in any way, shape, or form. Like I
Yeah,
said, due to stigma and other things, it was kind of nobody wanted to talk about it because it was too hard. And what really changed for us in having that mental health professional is we not only could support all of our clients, not just our PTSD clients, but our parents with autism. We started in our interviews talking to their parents about their circle of support. What is your mental health? Are you in a state of readiness to take on another dog, which is
yeah,
essentially another child in terms of your level of responsibility? Is your family ready for this? We weren't just focused on the child anymore. We were looking at the whole unit and the
yeah.
expertise that came to the table through our mental health professionals. Our first one, Tamara, she was with the Canadian Mental Health Association for 2 decades, right? So she had tons of experience and she's an expert in suicide prevention. Um, so not only was it super supportive to all of our clients, it framed how we screened clients and supported clients moving forward, but it also supported our staff and volunteers. Um, to be, when you do this job, you get people calling with all kinds of needs, desperate for help, desperate for a dog. They share their trauma, and without a mental health framework for your staff, they are subject to vicarious trauma that can cause PTSD in them as well.
Mhm.
So, again, one of our early pieces and the first things we did is put those supports in places for staff and taught them how to um, politely shut down conversations that could lead to vicarious trauma. Like we don't have to hear somebody's very traumatic story to know that they need a dog to support the symptoms that come from that.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of training. Our entire team, as we sit here, is trained in applied suicide skills intervention training. I'm an assistant instructor, as is one of our other staff members, and we
Mhm.
take those mental health pieces super seriously. Um, and we no longer require our training staff to be proficient in the social work parts of it. So we now have social workers on staff. Their entire job is to screen clients, interview clients. The trainers come in and actually do the dog transitional pieces, but then it goes back to client services, and then they do all the follow-up care unless there's a behavioral issue with the dog or some additional
Mhm.
training around the dog where the trainers will come in and backfill. And still within our industry, that's relatively still a novel concept. A lot of programs still actually have their training staff wearing multiple hats, doing client services
Mm.
and the training piece. But I don't think we'll ever go back to not having social workers handle that upfront stuff. They're trained in trauma response and the people pieces. And over the last I'd say 6 or 7 years, we've moved the organization to what we call citizen-centric approach, which means we aim to meet people where they're at, but
Mhm.
also part of our community of citizens are our dogs. So when we look at everything that we do, we look at the client, we look at the dog, and we look at them each as individuals, and we try
Yeah.
to meet them where they are. So if we have a client that maybe doesn't need all 5 tasks trained for PTSD, they only need 3. And we have a dog that isn't really good at 1 task, but is really good at the 3 that they need, that dog doesn't get disqualified or moved out of the program just because
Yeah.
it doesn't do a task that somebody doesn't need. Which is kind of, you task train the dogs and say, okay, these are all the tasks that the PTSD has to do. The PTSD dog has to do. But then the
Yeah.
client doesn't use them all. So what have you done? You've just put a lot of wear and tear on a dog
Hmm.
for no reason. So our goal for the last 5 years, especially, has been to meet the dogs where they're at, meet the clients where they're at, be honest about where everybody's at, and then put the
Yeah.
best placement together where the personalities and the needs align.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. Also, just for your organization, your 4 values are collaboration, compassion, ethical care, and innovation. And as a leader, how do you make sure that these values stay rooted in everyday decision making?
Oh, that's a hard question. I've been thinking about this since yeah, I mean, so the collaboration, I think, is built into the equation since day one. When we broke away and started National Service Dogs, we couldn't do this by ourselves. Our very first set of bylaws for the organization, our very first dog training manual, our very first client manual was shared with us through one of our partners at Pacific Assistance Dogs. Laura was the executive director at the time. She's still a dear friend of mine, but she gave us our foundational documents and structure
Yeah.
and helped us get started, right? And we've been collaborating with them for 30 years. They brought us into Assistance Dogs International. They were the first program in Canada to join Assistance Dogs International. They introduced us to ADI, and then we became the second program in Canada to become an ADI member, an
Hmm.
accredited member. And then we dragged everybody else behind us. And so those collaborations started from the beginning and have only continued, right? We work with Wounded Warriors Canada. They have been instrumental in moving our PTSD service dog program forward and our operational stress intervention dogs that we use for peer support in the first responder community. Um, so I'm a big believer that you can't be an island. You need to collaborate to be successful. And becoming members of Assistance Dogs International was really a turning point for us. We went to our first conference in 2020. We joined in 20 or not 2020, 2000. We joined in 2001. And my first conference was in 2001. And I was just I was so grateful because ADI's standards and their ethics and their training protocols gave us the roadmap we needed to be
Hmm.
successful. So fast forward to 2011, 2012, Imagine Canada is an accrediting body for charities here in Canada. It's like the Good Housekeeping Seal of Approval for charities.
Okay.
And they were developing a standards program for best practices for charitable businesses.
Hmm.
So the same thing, we were looking to really jumpstart our governance and our transparency and our charitable governance. And they gave us the roadmap to do it to the highest standards across Canada. And we were in the first cohort of charities to be accredited under the Imagine Canada standards in 2013. And we're still one of only 2 service dog providers in Canada to be Imagine Canada's accredited. So that piece of it has always been the compassion. Obviously, everybody who comes to the table with National Service Dogs, be it a volunteer, a staff, a donor, they're looking to help people, right? Like
Yeah.
the whole charitable piece is built on compassion, whether it's for the dogs, our clients, and our community. The ethical care is a huge one, especially for me. I tell people all the time, our dogs don't volunteer to be service dogs. They
Mm-hmm.
have been purposely bred and trained to do that role. But the fact that they don't get to volunteer for this, they're voluntold, puts the duty of care for us as an agency very sets that bar very, very high. We hold responsibility for their welfare for the entirety of their lives. We brought them into this world. We retain ownership of all our working service dogs. They're not
Mm-hmm.
adopted out to their families in retirement unless we're 100% sure that they're going to continue to live their best lives and be properly cared for. Um, and we take that duty of care incredibly seriously. We have protocols outlining our animal welfare standards, how we measure them, how we respond if there's a drop off in the welfare pieces, whether it's with volunteers or clients. And like I said, the dogs don't choose to do this. It's up to us to make sure we don't put a dog into a working environment that they can't handle,
Yeah.
that is not aligned with their mental health and their physical needs. And I mean, we're lucky. We have 2 years. It takes 2 years to develop a dog to the
Oh,
point where we
okay.
match it with a client. So in that 2 years, we gather a ton of data on the dogs. But during that time, we're also gathering a ton of data on our clients, right? So they run in parallel, those two data gathering systems run in parallel so that we can make the best match possible. Does it always go 100% right? No. Majority of the time it does. And people are highly successful with the dogs. And then the innovative, I mean, we were born on innovation. We pioneered the autism program. We were the first in Canada to do PTSD service dogs.
Yeah.
We're the first ADI accredited program in Canada to do PTSD dogs and to fully immerse ourselves in mental health, to bring on social workers on staff, not just having them on call for difficult situations. And we lead on the mental health pieces like suicide prevention and training for staff. Um, and our canine assisted interventions program, Pacific Assistance Dogs, was the first in Canada to roll out those programs. And they shared it with us. So we were the first to roll out canine assisted interventions in Eastern Canada from Ontario through to the Maritimes.
Yeah. No, your achievements is truly, truly amazing and inspirational.
Yeah.
Just tying back into what you were saying earlier, so one of NSD's values for ethical treatment is recognizing dogs as citizens with
Yeah.
the agency. So how does this belief shape the way that dogs are trained, matched, and supported throughout their lives?
So from the training side, so what we do is, as I said, we want to give our dogs the absolute best start in life. So, I mean, we work with other assistance dogs international programs, and we're part of a breeding cooperative that's almost 40 programs now. So when we're breeding our dogs, we can select stud dogs from across North America. So we can
Mhm.
get the best of the best genetics because all the dogs are screened for genetics, for joint health, for heart and eyes, and all the rest of it. But the database for the breeding cooperative also gathers data on temperament, so if a breeding female has 3 or 4 litters, you can go into the database and see how many of her produced dogs actually graduated as service or guide dogs.
Oh,
So you
wow.
can, so if they have a high turnover rate from birth to actual service work, you know that you have a good working line and you can breed appropriately, right?
Yeah.
So we're giving our dogs a best start on that front. But the other part of it is, dogs, like people, go through developmental stages, and we have developed a program for them that starts the minute they're born. So the day after they're born, we are doing handling exercises that have been tested and verified as the best practice for socializing puppies. So we start by touching them, moving them and turning them upside down, touching their paws. They can't, their ears and eyes are closed, so they don't hear or see, but they can smell. So you can introduce them to sense and touch. And there's a gradual process where you can introduce them and socialize them to sights and sounds and people. And it's all very purposeful. None of it is random. And it's all designed to give them the best emotional, mental, and physical start to their lives. And that philosophy carries right through their training for life. So we use force-free training. We do a lot of conditioning. They get a ton of treats because we do a lot of clicker training. Karen Pryor, most of the trainers have gone through her course. Shaping behavior is the biggest thing. And again, if a dog is not showing an aptitude for something, that they're not enjoying it, then that's a red flag, right? If you have a dog that just wants to, say, sleep half the day, doesn't want to be out going to the mall, going to the farmer's market, does it but doesn't really enjoy it, you have to say to yourself, oh, that's not an autism service dog. That's not a
Yeah.
PTSD dog. However, that dog may make a really good facility dog, because we have dogs that work in courthouses and with child and youth advocacy, where we need those dogs to jump on a couch, snuggle with a 5-year-old while that 5-year-old tells a police officer about what happened to them. And
Mhm.
we just need the dog to sleep all day on somebody's lap. So that dog can be very successful as a facility dog in that environment. So because we have 4 different programs, we can really look and fine tune the placements so that we are meeting the dog's needs and we're not forcing them into a role that they aren't going to be doing happily. Like if the dog if the dog doesn't, if we've done our job right, the dog sees what we consider work as a game, right? To them, it's not work. Like when you have a dog doing nightmare interruption for a client with PTSD, they have to pull the blankets off the bed. We play train that. They're trained to do it enthusiastically and they get rewarded for it. It's a big game. So when they're asked to do it in real life, is it stressful for the client? Yes, but for the dog, it's a game because we've trained them
Yeah.
to make it like a game. We call it work, but for the dog, if we've done our job right, it's not work. It's a game. If it is work, then that dog's not right for the role because it shouldn't be a slog for them
Yeah.
doing something that should be fun. So so that's how we support our dogs all the way through. We train our volunteers on best practices. I mean, obviously, over the years, the training protocols have changed considerably. When I started dog training over 30 years ago, we used choke chains and pinch collars and all kinds of stuff. That no longer happens. It doesn't happen in the industry here in Canada. All the ADI programs, we don't use choke chains, electric collars, pinches, nothing
Mhm.
like that. It's all flat collars, head halters, and like I said, it's as force free as possible. Um, so it's been a big shift to the betterment of the dogs, but it's one of those situations, right? As more studies come out and dog behavior is better understood, it's one of those know better, do better, right? Once you know
Yeah.
better, you aspire to do better and be open to that innovation. You have to be open to it as well, right? To learning new things, putting new tools in your dog trainer tool belt. But that goes for our clients as well, right? Like I said, how we dealt with our clients into 30 years ago and how we screen them, support them is completely different now. What we know about, if I'd known what I know now about mental health, things would have gone a lot differently 30 years ago for those early clients. It
Mhm.
was probably a little bit harder for them than it had to be because we weren't asking the right questions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's really interesting to learn about this, so thank you for sharing. Also tying into what you said earlier, so you have moved away from the rigid one-size-fits-all training model for
Yep.
like a more personalized needs-based
Yep.
approach. So what, like, I feel like you mentioned this already, but what really promoted that shift and how has it like improved the outcomes for both dogs and their clients?
Well, like I said, it's been a gradual shift, right? As new information comes forward, our team goes to training conferences, Assistance Dogs International conferences,
Yeah.
and there's 200 members worldwide for Assistance Dogs International. Through the glory of Zoom since 2020, we can do online workshops and courses, and because you're getting feedback and input from experts from around the world. It gives you like I said, you have to be open to the innovation, but it gives you opportunities to move forward, I think, quicker. One of the best examples of that was our early puppy development programs that I just described, where we start socializing the dogs straight away. We start doing some basic, like most of our
Mhm.
dogs start house training. We shape their behaviors to sit
Yeah.
and for attention and all kinds of stuff. We start that very young, like 4 weeks of age. But that program was developed by a woman in California. Her name's Bonnie Bergen, and she's one of the founders of ADI and the service dog movement.
Hmm.
And, you know, we saw her give a lecture at a conference about her early learning program for puppies. And she was starting clicker training with some of her puppies at 4 weeks of age. Very short sessions, very targeted, very positive. It was just a game for the puppies. But the outcomes on the other end were massive. They were able to get a better higher graduation. They were able to screen dogs that were suited to the work sooner because they were working with them and could see their capacity for learning and their love of the work sooner.
Yeah.
But we come away from that conference and it's like, we got to do that. That's awesome. We have to start building out that structure. We didn't start doing the clicker training at 4 weeks. We didn't have the training space to do it, but the whole development pieces started from that one conference, right? So
Yeah.
again, it goes back to the innovation. There's innovators, of which we sometimes we're the ones leading, but you also have to be open to when other people bring new stuff to the table to
Yeah.
come at it with an open mind and say, hey, that's a really good idea. We need to do that.
No,
Yeah,
it's
and
so nice to see how like it's a game for dogs, but then the impact that it makes on people is like so like big and amazing.
we owe them that, right? Like I said, they're not they don't volunteer for this, so it's our job to make their life fun.
Yeah. So also many people think that service dogs are only like one-on-one like work kind of that's how it works. But
Yeah,
at NSD, dogs are also supporting justice services like you said,
yeah,
victims, schools, police, firefighters.
yeah.
I would love if you could share a meaningful like story of like how you've seen like the impact it has made on someone.
So our facility dog program, which falls under our canine assisted interventions, is different from service dogs in that the dogs don't work for one person. The dogs are handled mostly by a social worker or a police officer or firefighter,
Hmm.
depending on their role. We have facility dogs that work in educational settings. So we've had dogs work with social workers for school boards.
Yeah.
Right now, we have a dog as part of the mental health team at a college in London.
Oh, okay.
We have peer support dogs that work for operational stress injuries. So they're part of the mental health team. For example, Cambridge Memorial Hospital has one of our facility dogs, and Ember's whole job is to support the mental health of the staff. She doesn't do patient interactions.
Yeah.
She's there, if the emergency room staff has had a difficult situation with say an accident or something come in that's highly traumatic, the mental health team will bring her in to tie as part of the debrief team, so that when people go home, the trauma, hopefully a lot of the trauma stays at the workplace and doesn't go home with them. Our victim support services dogs are incredible. So we have facility dogs matched with social workers working in courthouses across Ontario.
Hmm.
Dogs help children and youth that have been the victims of all kinds of stuff that we don't need to go into the trauma pieces. But when the kids enter the justice system, there's so many aspects of it. So they go with a social worker, and if that social worker, they want the dog there, the dog can be there as well. But they have to give a statement to the police telling their story and about what happened to them and who did what to them. They might have to go to the hospital to get evidence collected, and the dogs can go with them to the hospital to do that. Um, Over the course, if they are charging somebody with a crime against those children, there's a court process that is not short, it's long. So these dogs will steward their whole journey, and it can be months, if not years, and can actually sit with them while they're testifying. Now, here
Mm-hmm.
in Canada, having children testify in open court isn't really a thing. They do it in a closed room with closed circuit television cameras. So the kids literally can be on a couch with the dog and the
Yeah.
worker, and they get asked questions and they just talk to the dog usually, and then it comes through in their testimony.
Mm-hmm.
But the dogs, the one story I remember, um, here it happened here in Ontario. I can't say which program, but what happened was is the program had the dog, and the OPP had a situation with a 3-year-old. They were trying to collect evidence so they could make an arrest, and they
Mm-hmm.
couldn't get the 3-year-old to tell their story about what had happened to them. So they didn't have what they needed to make the arrest. So they called up the program that had the dog and said, look, can we try the dog? Can we just bring this child down and can we try the dog? So they walked in, the dog and the child met, and 20 minutes later, they had everything they needed to arrest the person who had injured that child and
Mm-hmm.
get all the evidence they needed. So when you hear stories like that, like the dogs aren't magic and they're not a solution for everybody, but when the difference between being scared and not being able to talk is whether you're talking directly to another human, whether it's a police officer or not, or to a big, beautiful chocolate lab who's giving you a snuggle while you're telling your story to them. I mean, it's all the difference for the kids, right? And
Yeah,
those dogs do incredible work because just retelling your story is re-traumatizing somebody, regardless of their age.
for sure.
If
Yeah.
dogs can soften that trauma and not help perpetuate the long-term effects, then it's really magical.
No, yeah, for sure. Now just moving away from this topic a little bit. So NST's annual Easter egg hunt has been running since 1988. That's so amazing, by the way. And it's happening,
1998, but yeah,
yeah, and
yeah.
it's happening again this Good Friday in several locations. Why do you think events like this are so important for building connections between NST and the community? And how can listeners and me, like, how can we get involved?
All right. So the Easter egg hunt for dogs is my baby. We actually started that event back in 1998 because at the time we didn't have our charitable status. We were incorporated non for profit, but we hadn't gotten our charitable status yet, and we weren't allowed to issue tax receipts. So we were just doing all kinds of different fundraisers to try and raise money. So we started out wanting to do like a treasure hunt or whatever, and it turned into an Easter egg hunt, and it stuck. So as we sit here today, all these years later, we are doing Easter egg hunts for dogs. So we have little plastic Easter eggs, of which I don't think I have any here. I have 5,000 of them up in my spare room, but we have little Easter eggs stuffed with milk bones and prize stickers.
Oh,
And each hunt, we put out about 5 or 6, 8,000 eggs, depending on how big the hunt is. And people with their dogs run around, collect up the eggs. And we have prize cards, and some of the stickers in those eggs align with prizes on our prize table. So you go home with tons of loot. Everybody who registers goes home with a swag bag full of doggy goodies, thanks to Purina, Milkbone, Benny Bullies, Kong. They all chip in prizes. And yeah, this year our Easter egg hunt goes every Good Friday. This year that is April 3rd. The hunts across Ontario start at 11. We have one in Calgary. So starting
mhm.
and going west to east, we have Calgary, Windsor, London, Kitchener, Guelph, and Hamilton Waterdown, up in Waterdown. So we have 6 different locations. You can go to our website, which is nsd.on.ca, and
Mhm.
register. We're doing early bird registration right now, so it's $25 per family. You can bring as many dogs as you want. You only get one swag bag for that. So if you want a swag bag for each of your dogs, you have to do multiple registrations. But yeah, it's super fun. The event has been highly successful for the last 28 years because it's family oriented. Before we started the Easter egg hunt, my family and I used to go for Good Friday hikes. Every Good
Mhm.
Friday was hiking day. And when we started the Easter egg hunt out at Bronte Creek Provincial Park in Oakville, that was where we first did it. My family, we used to run the event, and then we'd go for our Good Friday hike in the park. And then the hunt became so big We just did the hunt and then went to eat and went home. But what we found with the early events, and we still find today, is families make it a family tradition. So for the Oakville Hamilton Burlington hunt, because it's been the longest running one, we had families coming to us with their little kids
Yeah.
and their dogs having a blast. And then the kids would grow up and they'd come to us and say, "Oh, can so and so get his community service hours by volunteering at the hunt this year? We're still going to participate, but can he volunteer?" It's like, absolutely. And then you fast forward another decade, and that kid that was volunteering in high school is now married
Yeah.
with kids of their own and bringing them to
Oh,
the hunt. So, and that is, I mean, COVID put a bit of a damper on that because we weren't allowed to do it for a few years. But that is how much fun it is. And people have, like I said, we have in our early locations, we have people that make it an annual tradition. And so it's kind of cool to know that your family tradition has become somebody else's and
yeah.
it's been carried forward multiple generations.
Yeah. No, this sounds so exciting. And I'm so glad that it's like all across Canada, Alberta and then Ontario. So it's
Yeah.
really amazing.
Yeah.
And just like a last question, for those who want to learn a bit more about NSD or get involved, what's the best way for them to connect with your organization?
So the best way to connect is social media, of course. We are on Instagram and Facebook primarily. If you're interested in the dog training pieces, I strongly recommend Instagram and Facebook.
Hmm.
Every Tuesday, we post Trainer Tuesday videos, and it's a sneak peek behind the curtain, and it shows a day in the life of a service dog in training. So you can actually
Oh,
see the trainers doing the
yeah.
service dog training, and what the dogs are working on that week. And you get to know the dogs, and you can kind of see what we do with the dogs, and how they hang out at university during the week, and we have barrier-free training. The dogs literally are just on dog beds and they hang out until it's their turn to come and do some work, and then they go back to their bed, and it just rotates through the day. Um, our website obviously is www.nsd, short for National Service Dogs.on.ca. Everything you want to know about our programs is up there. To make a donation, you can sign up for the Easter egg hunt, and there's all of our events and partners and all the good stuff that goes on and all about us. Um, and then we have YouTube videos as well. So our YouTube channel, you will see some of our graduation ceremonies, some training videos, and things of that nature.
Thank you for sharing that. And Danielle, thank you so much for joining us today for this podcast and like sharing your incredible work that's been going on since 1996, right? So
I know I
thank you
feel
so
old.
much. No, no, it's really amazing, and the impact like this has made on individuals
Yep.
and in communities is really, really great. So yeah, thank you
Yeah.
so much to our viewers as well for listening to the Real Talk podcast.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. And yeah, I hope you have good all the best with the podcast. And it's always great to let people know about what we do. If they live in Waterloo region, we have volunteer opportunities. We're always looking for puppy raisers. Our dogs get school bused in and out of university every day, so we're looking for volunteer drivers. We're looking for puppy raisers. We're looking for help at each of those 6 Easter egg hunts. We're looking for individuals to help us out at those events. So if you live within our catchment area for volunteering, we would always love to see you. You can sign up to volunteer on the website. And obviously, we are a charitable entity. We rely 100% on donations. We don't get government funding.
Mhm.
So any donations for the work that we're doing goes directly into the training of our dogs. So we're great. We're super grateful for everybody who contributes.
Yes. Thank you so much, Danielle, once again. And to our viewers, hope you all have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.